thing she saw in a scene being filmed was Ann Dusenberry, the actress, who was playing her, supposedly peeing in a washbowl and then calling for a towel. I wasn't a slob, Luann objected, and besides, there's no need to show something like that. There's no redeeming value in that. Then she watched the filming of a scene where Sissy Spacek, playing Carolyn Cassidy, comes into a hotel room in Denver and acts so indignant to find Neil, Nolte, Luann, and Allen Ginsberg, Ray Sharkey, all in bed together. What did she have to be indignant about, Luann asked me. After all, Neil was my husband, not hers yet. Luann winked at me, and a wry smile crossed her face. I was beginning to get the sense that she was a bit of a card, as they used to say. For the past few months, I have been spending quite a bit of time with Carolyn Cassidy. I liked Carolyn, but she could be a bit pompous and ponderous with her lectures on Edgar Cayce, karmic debts, and reincarnation. Carolyn did not have much of a sense of humor, and not at all the sort of quick humor that Luann had. Luann told me more about the reenactment of that infamous three-way sex scene in Heartbeat. She felt the director, John Byram, had done his best to make it seem as tawdry and kinky as possible. When the three of us went to bed together, Luann said, Neil always used to be in the middle, and Alan and I would be on either side of it. The 2 or 3 times we all actually had sex together, it was very nice. She smiled again at me, not the wry smile, but almost the Mother Mary smile again. There was nothing obscene about the sex we had with each other, nothing you couldn't show on a screen or that you'd need more than a PG-13 rating for, she averred. Of course, she won me over that quickly. I had never known any women like Luann, who could talk so easily about sex and yet also make it seem so natural and healthy, nothing to be ashamed of or to make a big deal about at all. She was as at ease talking about sex as she was talking about anything else in her life. Remember, this was a good 2 decades before we had a program like Sex and the City. And always, everything, even the painful stuff, was conveyed with her irrepressible sense of humor. She told me a story I had never heard, that when she had come to New York with Neil in 1949, and then he turned around and wanted to drag her right back to the West Coast, she figured out a way to thwart him. She loved New York, and she was starting to fall in love with Jack Kerouac at the same time, and she wanted to stay in the Big Apple at least a while longer. Ginsberg, too, did not want Neil running off so fast. So she and Alan announced their plans to live together in New York, and Alan was going to go straight. She let out a big laugh before she continued with her story. Our real motive, she confided, was to make Neil jealous, because he'd never want to lose Alan and me to each other. He'd be back east in 2 days if we ever really did that. The plan fell through, she said, only because Alan was less than keen about actually trying to become her lover. Nick Nolte didn't seem anything like Neil to her. Neil moved much faster than Nick Nolte, she said. When I met Neil, he had 6 books under one arm, a pool cue in the other hand, and started necking with me at the same time. A whole flood of memories came back to her. I was trying to take notes, but it was hard for me to keep up. Suddenly she was living back in those days. Names of people were coming back to her hot and fast. She told me about the 3 guys standing up at her wedding. Bill Thompson, Jim Holmes, Jimmy Penoff. She was only 15, and her mom consented in order to get her out of the house, where Luann was having a lot of problems with her stepfather and had become rebellious, more than her mom could handle. She laughed about Bill Thompson, one of Neil's rivals in the local pool hall gang, a guy who fancied himself as much a ladies' man as Neil. Bill wouldn't get out of their room on their wedding night. He wanted to share in the honeymoon. Again, she laughed at one of her memories, how she had to kick Thompson out of the honeymoon suite, which was just a room Neil had rented in a private house, and where she worried that their noisy lovemaking that night kept the other residents up. Luann's eyes sparkled when she talked about Neil. She said Neil was always reading to her. She said he always wanted her back, that she didn't force herself on him, as Carolyn always claimed. Then she went into a reverie. She was thinking of Neil's letters, and her eyes got a little moist and unfocused. It was as if she left the hospital room with me for a few moments, her spirit traveling back decades and across 1,000 miles of continent, as if she were being hit by waves of bittersweet pain, thinking of something that was once too beautiful and way too beautiful to lose. He wrote me the most marvelous love letters, she said. It was when he had just come back to San Francisco and I was still in Denver, and he wanted me back in his life. He told me that he was a rudderless ship without me, and other lovely things like that. The things he wrote overwhelmed me. But it was the battle with Carolyn that obsessed her that afternoon in the hospital. A battle she had long ago lost, a defeat which the making of the movie now seemed to confirm and memorialize for all time. Carolyn was a woman to me, Luann pleaded for my sympathy. What chance did I have? I was 16 and she was in her 20s. Carolyn's making herself look good in this movie. She portrays herself as this beautiful and sophisticated woman, this siren that two brilliant and experienced men fell madly in love with. That's not the way it was at all. Carolyn had merely got herself pregnant. I'll skip a little bit here. Carolyn and Neil weren't making it together, Luann said. Only a short time after they got married, the sex had stopped. It was that simple. That's why he was so desperate to get me back. We talked for a while more until she started to tire. I was trying to get as much information as I could from her. But this wasn't the sort of full interview I had wanted. She didn't know when she would be out of the hospital, and I didn't have the money to stay in San Francisco much longer. I figured whatever I got from her that day was all I was going to get. She told me I'd have to go. She needed her rest. When you come back, I'll buy you lunch, she told me, batting her eyelashes at me. I couldn't believe it. She was flirting with me. Mildly, it's true, but still flirting. Then we can sit in the park and hold hands. I was 20 years younger than she, but completely smitten. She was beautiful. She was clearly wounded, and she was unbelievably charming. Then we'll have something to look forward to, I said. I must have looked like a puppy dog in love. She told me she needed some candy and a pack of Winston's, and I set off on the run for the commissary. It's kind of amazing to look back and remember that in the 1970s you could still buy cigarettes in a hospital. For all I know, they even had a lounge for patients where Luann could have smoked them. In any case, I returned in a jiffy and handed her the Winston's and the 3 candy bars she'd requested. Thanks, honey, she said. I was rewarded by the warm, glowing smile of a well-loved woman. It was clear she was used to attention from men, and she still liked it. Something about her expression reminded me of a purring cat, the visual equivalent of a cat's purr. I extended my hand to her. Still a Midwesterner, I was ready to part with a handshake. But she grabbed my hand with both her good hand and the bandaged one and gave me a loving squeeze. Get well soon, I said, trying to convey a little burst of healing energy in her direction. I was no longer thinking of my much sought-after interview. I just wanted her to be well, to be happy. The fact is, she had charmed the socks off me. No mean feat for a middle-aged woman with no makeup, a bandaged hand, and dressed in a baggy hospital gown. I left the room with her oodles of charisma trailing after me, feeling as if I had just been granted a meeting with Hedy Lamarr or Lana Turner. That's where I'll end. And I would like